In this lesson, I'm going to import some assets as well as begin making our level. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go back to the assets folder. I can click right here. As you can see, we're in Standard Assets 2D Prefabs. I can just go back to the assets by clicking on assets. Now I'm going to bring up this folder where I have a couple images. I'm just going to select both of them and drag and drop them in here. Okay, so now I've imported these. And one thing that's nice about when we had this set up as a 2D project is that when I import these images, it goes ahead and sets their type to be sprites, which is good for what we're doing. We're doing a 2D game here, so that'll be useful and nice to use. Okay, cool. So we have these now imported. Okay, and the buzzsaw is going to be one of our hazards, and the hearts are going to be used for our health. So, but for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start designing the level. So I'm going to go back into Standard Assets, back into 2D, into Prefabs, and now what am I going to do now? Well, I think what I want to do is right off the bat, one thing we're going to need to know how to do is, of course, move left and right, and that should be fairly easy to figure out, using the arrows and everything. But something that might be, take a second or two more, but we need to teach right off the bat, is the concept of jumping. So what I'm going to do is right after this edge here, I'm going to go ahead and put in our first, chasm. And so you can fall into it and then the level will restart. So you have to know how to jump over it in order to progress throughout the level. So this will be teaching that right off the bat. So what do we want to use to teach that? Well, I'm going to go ahead and drag in this piece here. There's like a nice ramp. And I'm going to put the gap right in between the two. So there we go. We have our gap. And I'm going to move around in this space, in our scene space, by holding in Control and Alt, and then just left click and dragging around. So I can look around like this, and I can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. That's how I'm navigating around this space, okay? So that's Control, Alt, left click and drag to pan around, and it's just the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. So fairly simple, okay. And okay, so I'm just taking a look at this level, and it looks fine. So we have that. Okay, cool. We have our first little thing we have to do there. So I'll teach that. And now what we want to do is, maybe when you get to the top of this, we're going to have a buzzsaw you have to jump over. So let's go ahead and just drag this in here, and it's way too big. So I'm going to make that a bit smaller. I'm going to grab this edge here, start scaling down, hold in, let's see, Alt and Shift. Really, I just need to make sure I hold down Shift because that's keeping it from warping, strangely. I can move it here in a second. So maybe just like that big is fine. Let's go compare to our guy. Move it over to him and see how big that is. Maybe I want it a little bit smaller even. So holding in Shift, okay. So that seems like a good size. And I'll just move back up here. So we want to be able to jump over this when we get to the top. Okay. Cool, so we have that. Let's go ahead and press play and just see how this works so far. So, oh look, our camera is not following our character. So we can fix that as well. Let's go ahead and just do that now so we can start testing. I'm going to hold in Control and Alt and just pan back over here. For our main camera, okay, this is our main camera over here in the hierarchy. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and child this camera to our character here so that it will move around with our character. So I can do that by just drag and dropping it onto our character, just like that. And then you'll see that the camera does follow. And that looks fine and everything. I'm going to make sure that it's centered because, well, let me just show you something. If this camera was not centered, and it might be centered, I want just to make sure. I'm going to go and select it, and then, and for me to move it, I'm going to go ahead and select the these arrows here in the tools, so I get these arrows to come up, and then I'm going to just move it over here a little bit, and I'm going to play, and yeah, so that happened. So it looked like it wasn't happening before, and that, so it might be positioned properly, but just to make sure, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the component values of our character. So here in the transform, I'm going to copy these values. So copy component. I'm clicking on the little gear icon and going to copy component. That'll copy all the values of this transform. and then I'm going to paste them onto our main camera. But I also want to keep note of the Z, because I'm going to change that back to what it is now in a second. So I'm going to click on the gear, and then I'm going to paste component values. And now you can see in our game view over here is that this is made, it's made that nothing really visible anymore. So that's sort of strange. And by the way, my setup here might be a little different. You might have this over here so that you'd switch between scene and game like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just switch this back to default, so make sure we have similar layouts, just like that. Okay, cool. So yeah, right. So in the game view, yeah, maybe nothing's visible, so that might be a problem. That's why I need to change that Z value back to be -10, and then each thing should be visible again. So -10, enter, and yeah, we can see down here actually in the preview for the camera that it is visible. So now if I play, we won't have that weird thing. Okay, so there we go. Very good. And there's no collision right now with this thing, but we're going to work on that later. We'll take this one step at a time, but the idea is, yeah, you jump over that, and then you got to make sure you jump over this. Okay, cool. So that's it for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.